We welcome to the airwaves the District Attorney of Lebanon County, Pier, Hess, Graf. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Laura. How are you?
I am well, thank you. This is going to be your bid for a second elected term
Yes, ma'am.
as County District Attorney. How do you describe yourself as a District Attorney? What term would you use to say this encapsulates Pier, Hess, Graf?
So I would say in terms of my job, I am a trial lawyer who got elected to my office. So when I started under Dave Arnold back in 2009, I loved going to trial. It was the most exhilarating yet terrifying experience to go in front of a jury and make a position and advocate for a victim. And then you put it before 12 people and you do everything you possibly can to get the verdict that you think is accurate, which obviously for us is guilty. And it was the most wonderful experience. And I loved going to trial. So to date, I've tried 107 cases. And with every one, you learn something new. You learn how to do something better or differently or something to add to make it easier for a jury to give you that word guilty at the end. But this was never the plan. I frankly expected Dave Arnold to be the district attorney forever. And I thought I was just going to stay as a senior deputy and try violent crime, violent felony, and homicide. And then when he decided he wanted to run for Senate, someone had to take over. Someone had to take the helm. And at that point, I wasn't a political person by any means. I still don't really consider myself a political person. But I knew I could try a case and I could teach people to try a case the way that Dave taught me. And that was really important for me because I think the best gift that I was given in his office is how to be an excellent trial lawyer, how to be a great litigator on behalf of a victim. So that, from my perspective, that's how I would describe myself.
Now, you say you're not a political person, and I have always maintained, I told this to Dave Arnold many a time, I don't think the administration of justice ought to be Democrat or Republican.
Agreed.
I think the district attorney's office ought to be a nonpartisan position, like get 100 registered voters' signatures, but wherever they come from. That's not the way it's done.
Correct.
That being said, you are a proud and active member of the Lebanon County Republican Party.
100% lifelong Republican, as is my entire family, my parents, my grandparents. Always. But when I look at my job, I do agree with you. And one of the first trainings that you go to when you become the elected versus just somebody in the office is they send you to an elected DA course through the DA's Association here in Pennsylvania. And Kevin Steele from Montgomery County comes in and he teaches this segment about how your personal views on political topics are really not something relevant to the office. What's relevant is how you fight crime, how you combat crime. What do you do with the worst that humanity has to offer? So when somebody asks me a political position or a political feeling that doesn't have to do with my actual job, what I try to respond with is I will follow the law as it is set by the legislature and I will enforce that law to the utmost of my abilities. I do have a lot of strong personal, frankly, conservative Republican beliefs, but if they don't apply to how I do my job, I try to keep those in check as best I can.
Has there ever been a time in the course of your work as DA where there was a personal feeling that you had regarding the case affected the way in which you prosecuted it?
So I would say the best example of that would be 2020 when COVID hit. We were getting a lot of questions at the office, and I'm really proud that my staff, we were open every day. And it wasn't a full staff, but we wanted to make sure that your district attorney's office, the administration of justice, continued even as Governor Wolf was trying to shut everyone and everything down. So we were there every single day. Your police were patrolling every single day. And people were calling into the office. I was answering phones at one point, and they were asking, we were told we're not allowed to open this business. What happens? Because I have bills and I have inventory that's going to go bad, and I don't know what to do. I felt very strongly that it is not the duty of law enforcement to tell a business person, no, you can't put food on the table or a roof over your head. And at that point, we released the first and then the second public statement on that saying, if you want to open, do it respectfully, do your best to comply with what the social distancing and those mandates were, but open. Live your life, earn money, do what you need to do for your family, but it's not my job as your district attorney or a law enforcement official to tell you how you can and can't live your life. So I think that's probably the best example of a quasi-political, but yet also quasi-law enforcement aspect.
There was a roofer in
Yes.
the eastern part of Lebanon County.
That ultimately got resolved. The issue became, and that we tried to view it, if you wanted, let's say, open up your beauty salon and you had to be open, you had to make money, and I get it. Everyone has mortgages and bills and they want to put groceries on the table. I got it. What we didn't want was for people to take advantage of that stance. So I didn't want there to be a block party at a parking lot of a business. I didn't think that congregating 25, 30 people in a room that wasn't a purpose of actually administrating the business and earning money. I didn't think that was necessary.
And that's what happened, right?
Yes. And that ultimately got worked out. Everything was resolved. But what we try to explain to people is we want you to be respectful about how you do it.
All right. You said that you have prosecuted 107 cases. What's your record? And I asked that because there was a reference made in one of your press releases or something that you have a 100% perfect record of prosecution.
So I have that since becoming your district attorney. And from a career perspective, from 2009, which is when I started in the office, until today, I've tried 107 cases. In that 107, the majority of those were before I became the district attorney. What I've done since I became the DA back in 2020 was almost every homicide. I'm not great at delegating murder trials, as my staff will woefully attest to. But I've tried 5 homicides, and I took 1 aggravated assault. It was a stabbing at a gas station, broad daylight in public. I felt pretty strongly about that, so I took that one to trial as well. So I have a 100% conviction rate since I became the DA. Every murder was a first-degree conviction, which means life in prison. The defendant's going to die there. From a career-wide perspective, I'm between 84 and 85%.
Is that important to you to have that win-loss record and to tout it?
So I think in terms of asking people for their vote and asking for their support, I absolutely think it's extremely important for you to know, how do I perform as your elected DA? I'm put in my job by the voters and the citizens of Lebanon County. And I think you should want to know what the return rate is on putting me in this job. Before I became the DA, I didn't think my conviction rate was important. What was important was the work and the effort that I put into a trial. I have learned more from the losses that I have had in court than I have from the wins, because there's such a feeling of disappointment in yourself. I've never blamed the jury. It's always a failure of mine if it comes back not guilty. And thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't heard that not guilty in a very long time. But I can tell you the losses that I have had and how they stay with me even today, and how they haunt you even today, because I failed a victim. I failed Lebanon County. The wins are amazing. And looking back at the trials I've done since I took over, Maxwell was probably the hardest and the most meaningful. So in 2022, we took that case in March, and the jury came back guilty, first-degree homicide. And that was the case where the father and the stepmother tortured, starved, beat that little boy to death in Anvil. And the fact that I drove by that house on a regular basis, just as many
As
other
did
people,
all of us.
and you didn't realize that on the second floor of that home, this little boy was laying to waste in his own waste, just suffering and dying and crying. It was awful. It was so heartbreaking to have to do that.
I covered that trial, and during the course of these trials, sometimes the crime scene photos have to come in.
Yes.
And as a reporter, that haunts me to see that. And several other crime scene photos in various other trials I've covered. So I can appreciate how that stays with you, because you live with these pictures and these things much more than just reporters in the courtroom or people in the gallery.
People ask, what is it like to do the work that you do, and how do you function getting through it? And it sounds horrible, but you almost have to lose an aspect of your humanity, because you have to be the vessel for getting that case to a verdict. And I have to be able to go into court and show these horrible pictures of how Maxwell died. And to do that, every hour you see in court is probably 10 to 15 hours of prep time outside of court. To be able to do that and to have to look at Maxwell and then show it to other people and be his advocate in death, because he didn't have one in life, it was a struggle. I would come home pretty much every day and tell my husband, tell my family, I cannot wait to not have to look at this anymore. It was really hard to have to watch the way that child died. And then as every piece of evidence that we would uncover, and oftentimes in homicide trials, we go through cell phones and we go through text messages and social media. And to hear the way that female spoke about that little boy, even up to the point of death, she didn't view him as a child. She didn't view him, frankly, even a human being. And then to see that she took his COVID stimulus payment and she went and bought steaks and burgers and barbecue food
for all the other kids.
Every other kid, as Maxwell laid upstairs and died the next day. When we found that a few weeks prior to trial, It was one of the most breaking pieces. It really was.
Yeah, that trial was incredible. The things that were relayed as to the goings on in that house. As you say, you drive past it on 934, you turn and you drive past it every day or often, and you didn't know what the horror that was going on there. At this juncture, and I just had Sean Drasher on in the last segment, I said, technically nobody is a candidate until all the paperwork is in and everything is approved. But at this juncture, it seems as though there could be a contest in the Republican primary with you and public defender Michael Light II. When he was in for his interview, I asked him, how are you going to switch sides? How are you going to go from the defender's table to the prosecutor's table? And he relayed that he has never prosecuted a case, but he thinks that he can prove the case just the same. What is your thought as a potential challenge from him?
So I firmly believe that I was born a prosecutor. When I
You had a very short stint as a PD, didn't you?
I did. So I graduated from law school. I went in Pittsburgh. That's where I went to law school. And my mentor was a former public defender. So he had me start with the Allegheny County Public Defender's Office. I made it 10 days of part-time work, the majority of which was human relations training and filling out your paperwork. I went to one court day of prelims, and I sat there and I thought, these people lie. Everybody lies. This is horrible. I can't do this for a living. I cannot represent these people. So I quit that day. So that was a solid maybe 10 hours total. And then I moved home. I moved back in with my parents. And that's when I had to figure out, what do I want to do for a living? And I started working for Judge Klein. Bless him. He gave me my first local job opportunity. And when you work for a judge, you're able to go into court and watch it every single day. And that's what I did. And when I watched the DA's office back then, and it was Dave Arnold, John Ditzler, and Bob McAteer in court pretty often. And I thought to myself, if I can be 10% of what they are, it would be such an accomplishment in terms of a career. And especially with John Ditzler, John could sit in court and ask questions of a police officer, a victim, anyone. And he didn't have all these copious notes in front of him. He just understood his case and it flowed so naturally from him. And it was an amazing thing to watch. And when I started with the DA's office in 2009, that's what I worked to become. You had these examples of the best prosecution work and you just wanted to replicate it. But getting back to your question, do I think it's going to be an easy transition for him? Absolutely not. He's never prosecuted a case. We have the burden of proof. And when you have that, you have to look at a file that comes through. And I have never once taken to a jury the file as it's presented to me. I can look at a potential trial and identify every strength, every weakness, every something that I can do to add to it. Does this piece of evidence need to be forensically tested? Have we gone through all the video? How do I enhance the video to show it to a jury? And then you have to put yourself in your juror's shoes. And we frankly, we'll go into court early and we'll go through all of our visual aids and all of the audio evidence, things like that. And we sit in the jury box. Is it hard for them to see? Is it hard for them to read? Can they hear it? Is this piece of evidence meaningful to a juror? And we do dry case runs, especially of the homicides, where I put people who are not employed by my office, they sign a confidentiality agreement, and they watch the case, plus my staff who knows nothing about it. And I want to hear, how does the average person respond to the case that I have before I go into court?
Does everybody do that? Other DAs, do they do that? Or are you just neurotic like that?
I am neurotic. I have never heard of another person doing that. And I will say it is not common to be the elected DA and try cases the way that I try cases. And I mean this as no disrespect to my counterparts. But if you go to Lancaster, that DA has never tried a case, ever. And she
Heather Adams
never tried a case. It's correct.
Oh, wow.
Right. When you go down to Berks County, I love John Adams. He has an enormous office. He's not going into court. And meanwhile, I do go into court. For a while, it was myself and my first assistant.
But is that because you don't have the luxury of a staff the size that they do?
There was a period of time where we were desperate to hire, and it was really difficult. We went a year without getting an attorney application. And at that point, myself and my first assistant, we were doing bench warrants, miscellaneous court. We were going in every day. Frankly, it was fun. And then we now are really blessed with the staff that we have. We have senior experienced people at the top to teach and mentor the younger ones. But we have younger attorneys who have the same hunger and the same desire that I had back then, and they want to learn. So part of my job is still going to court, but the other part of my job is to give them the cases that I started on and then teach them how to do it. And not everyone's going to do it in my fashion. You can't replicate my trial style. I think it comes across as really inauthentic. You have to put your own personal touch and your own spin on it, but they still have to check all the boxes of this is what you need for proper preparation.
Let me ask you about a recent controversy. I would sum it up as saying you lost your temper
Yes.
and forgot a reporter was in the room and you were on the record. Or were you not on the record?
I would say that would be a gray area. So you are absolutely correct in that I lost my temper. And I think what people sometimes expect from myself and from your other elected officials is they forget that we're human beings and we are all fallible and everybody's going to make a mistake.
And just to be clear, so listeners know if they don't know, this was regarding a lengthy investigative report by Penn Live about sexual assault prosecutions in Lebanon County.
Yes. No, I would say a lengthy investigative report with quotation marks around that, because that was part of my ire with the whole thing. It's really easy to say you're doing a, quote, investigative report, but when you approach it with a vendetta, with an agenda, and you already know what decision or end you want from the article, all you have to do is skew your facts and skew your statements to get to that end. And I work really hard in this job. I grew up in Lebanon County. I'm from here. My parents are still here. I'm 5 generations deep here. I care very much about keeping Lebanon County safe. And any contention or allegation that's not true or that we're not doing our jobs is ridiculous. We fought very hard to steal a sexual assault prosecutor from Heather Adams. We were successful, and I thank our commissioners very much in working with me for staffing. But we have hired one of the toughest, strongest sexual assault child abuse prosecutors I've ever met. She at times makes me look nice in court, and that's saying something. And she is such a bulldog for victims. I love Amy, and she is working with our sexual assault, our local nonprofit, and the domestic violence nonprofit, and they say glowing things about her. She's almost at 1.5 years in the office. So the idea that we're not fighting for these victims is really offensive to me.
That being said, though,
Yes.
you lost your temper and you
100%.
said that you wished a reporter would get burned in a fire.
So there was a comment made that sitting here today in front of you, I am not proud of. What I can tell you is that it is really hard to have not only those reports get circulated, but I think what people fail to understand is there is a correlation to those types of articles coming out, which unfortunately now is anonymous emails, anonymous calls to my office, and social media. And it's difficult to do my job as a woman regardless. The problem that I've experienced is the attacks get very different when you are a female versus a male. And it's hard when these articles come out and it transitions into rape threats, death threats, threats against my family, threats against my husband, who is a law enforcement officer. And it was inundating with things like that. Things were sent to my emails. There is fake social media everywhere about this. And I broke. I absolutely broke. I should not have said the thing that I said. The contention that I have with that article and the mistrust I have of that reporter and the bone I have to pick about the things that article said, that mistrust, is 100% still there. I still feel the same way today about those contentions and those allegations as I felt back in October, even as she continued to post essentially the same types of articles over and over and over again. But should I have lost my temper in that way? Absolutely not. I shouldn't have said it in the way I said it. But again, I'm a human being, I'm fallible, and I made a mistake.
Did you try to apologize to her for it? Or did you just leave it at that?
So it wasn't said to her directly.
No.
And at that point, she has never reached out to me about it. Her editor has. And I left it as separation and we're moving forward. She has never asked or reached out to me individually about that matter. And with that, we're moving forward.
Do you consider yourself user-friendly for the media? Do you think appropriate access when reporters inquire about things?
I think that we do as best we're able. For example, yesterday we have a younger female. She's 15. She went missing. Her family had ties to Lebanon County. Her mother reached out to us about, can you please help me find my daughter? And we put out a press release with her photograph. Anytime we have a major trial conviction, we do that. If there's a case that I think is going to garner public interest, we do that. I try my best to answer everything that comes in. At times, it's just impractical given the fact that I still have a caseload and I have a job to do besides just answer to emails and things all day long. But yes, frankly, I think you and I have a great relationship.
Yeah.
Matt Toth from the Daily News knows how to reach me. Same thing with just about every other local reporter. So yes, I consider myself user-friendly as best I'm able. There are times where we're just not able.
There are things, there are gag orders and you can't say things and it frustrates us as reporters.
100%.
But we understand that those are the rules of the road.
And the other aspect that I don't think many people understand, there are rules that apply to attorneys, including prosecutors, that once we file a charge and we get past a prelim, we are not supposed to continue to talk about things. For example, that triple homicide that we had back in May of 2023, I pretty often get emails or contacts from the media saying, can you talk about this? Frankly, I can't. I can tell you procedurally where we're at with the case. And if there's a public filing, I can respond to it. But other than that, we're really not supposed to comment. And frankly, the purpose behind that, a jury's verdict, one, is going to come from people in Lebanon County. So I never want to give a comment and improperly influence the jury. And two, I believe very strongly in the sanctity and the power of a jury trial. And going back to that initial, Penn Live article, I got frustrated in that they did a one-sided, very biased interview of a pending trial. And it's so offensive to me as a prosecutor because I want those 12 people sitting in the box to hear the evidence as it comes, as ruled upon and approved by a judge from a witness's mouth, and they make their verdict. That's all that I've ever asked for in a case. And you have to believe in the process to do this job.
All right. I'm going to give you the final minute here to make your pitch to Republican primary voters.
So I would say this, that the best predictor of future behavior is past. And what a voter can look at with me is I've been in that office since 2009. I'm born and raised in Lebanon County. I believe very strongly in violent criminals behind bars and keeping Lebanon County safe. They can look at my conviction rate. They can look at my record. And you have a proven winner if you look at that. And I can tell you, I would give every aspect of my being for a trial, a conviction, and to fight for a victim in court.
All right. Pier, Hess, Graf, thank you very much for your time.